Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar, which is going to look at using Microsoft Teams and how that can be used to support teaching and learning, obviously remotely and also in the classroom. Just a little bit about our consortium. The consortium that we're in, the Demonstrator Consortium, is made up of 3 separate schools, each one covering a different phase. So there's a primary school, there's a secondary and a special school as well. And that gives us a diverse makeup to our consortium, which means that we can offer a full range of support to all the primary, secondary and post-16 phases. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to give you a real life view on how EdTech can be used across the whole organisation. Can I just say at this point that if you would like to ask any conversations, that you do this by posting it in the conversation window at the side, and you can access this by hovering over the menu in the middle at the bottom and hitting the speech bubble, and you'll be able to post any questions in there. And what we will do is we will stop at points throughout the webinar to answer those questions that you may have. So thank you very much for that. And I know 1 or 2 of you have been on the webinars before. I'm just going to apologise slightly at this stage. There might be 1 or 2 aspects that we have covered before, but we hope that most of the content is new content that you can have a look at and take away to use. So in terms of a consortium, we've got the ability to offer a wide range of things. That's ranging from digital platforms that we're having a look at today with Teams, about how to harness EdTech for more remote and hybrid working. I think one big aspect as well is we can look at how we can keep children safe whilst using EdTech in this remote way. Because we have Highfurlong in there, we can not only offer support around the use of EdTech in mainstream education to support SEND pupils, but also to especially support support those with additional special educational needs. I think a big part at the moment is how we manage pupil and teacher wellbeing. So that's both for staff and for pupils as well, and supporting the CPD for teachers and the wider staff within school. And ultimately, to sort of hold this all together, it's about how you go about with your EdTech transformation strategy. Thank you for those of you who've just joined us late into the webinar. Could I ask, if you have joined late, that you go to mute and you turn your cameras off, please, at this stage? That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much. So carrying on, I thought it'd be prudent just to give you a little bit of an overview of Ribblesdale in terms of the EdTech journey and how Teams has fit in with this, and then we'll get on to specifics about how we use it. So in terms of Ribblesdale, a lot of you know what who Ribblesdale are, but some won't. We're a local authority 11 to 16 school. We've got a mixed backgrounds of about 1,300 pupils from a diverse and quite a wide area. We use Office 365 to support for teaching and learning across the whole school in terms of management functions and things like that. And we're in the position where we've got 1,000 of our pupils with a Windows 10 one-to-one device. What I would say at this point is that there are lots of things that you can do without being in the situation of one-to-one devices. So hopefully we'll be able to highlight those and how Teams can play a part. So in terms of EdTech to support teaching and learning, I think there are a few questions to ask yourselves, and ordinarily organisations would have a number of years to roll out their EdTech strategy, but unfortunately at this stage it's going to be done in a compressed way for a lot of people. But there are still lots of things to consider, and I think the order still matters. So EdTech is there to enhance what already goes on in the classroom and across school. It's not about throwing out everything you've ever done and starting from scratch. It's obviously there to support teaching and learning, and it's just another tool in the toolkit of every teacher. We all have them. There's different pedagogies, and it's there to support the pedagogy that we use in everyday life within the classroom, whether that's within school or, as it is at the moment, remotely working away from school. But it's not about starting from scratch. It's about enhancing and supporting what already happens. This next one's key. Staff must come before students, even in the time now where we are absolutely desperate to get students and pupils on board. We must make sure the staff are confident and competent in using it as much as possible before we roll out to the wider school. And obviously that will involve some form of CPD, and I've had numerous conversations over the past few weeks with schools and organisations who are looking about how that CPD works and how it can be delivered in a remote fashion. But please make sure, wherever possible, that staff are confident and go before the students and pupils. And I think then you've got a question is, which EdTech tools do I want to use? We are being bombarded at the moment as educators with a number of tools that are out there. And I would suggest that we stick with the ones that actually we already use. So I know a lot of you will use things like Kahoot and maybe Doddle. Some of you are probably using things like LBQ. And then maybe you start to look at using OneNote, and obviously you've all got an interest, and probably a lot of you are already starting to use Teams in terms of an EdTech tool. But you need to decide as an organisation, obviously with input from others around in other schools, as to which EdTech tools you think are important. And I think the question is, well, why should we bother? What is the point of EdTech? Well, we all know the point at the moment. But I think the word that comes to mind is that stickability. This is a fantastic opportunity for EdTech to sit there and play a more prominent role within all sorts of aspects of education beyond the situation we find ourselves in. But ultimately, we've got to consider the impact. Is that a positive impact? If not, do we need to review? Do we need to evaluate? Do we need to drop it? And it's like any other mechanism. But what I would say is, although it's difficult at the moment to sort of take a step back, do take a step back and consider what will be the long-term impact of implementing this aspect of EdTech within our school at this point in time. So what about Teams at Ribblesdale? How does that look? Well, I'll split it into 3 bits really. Pre-remote working, we were using it for staff collaboration and communication, and it was started to become the main way of communication above email within school. There were some of our teachers were using it as a digital platform with their learners, but that wasn't by any stretch the majority. It was used by those teachers to support what went on in the classroom as very much an extension of their classroom, perhaps when those learners went away at home to do homeworking. Obviously, during remote working, a lot of organisations, us included, started to scramble about how Teams was going to help us and how it was going to work. And it is that virtual classroom. I think Teams now should be viewed as, ordinarily we have a physical classroom which we teach from and using all those tools that are available, whether that be EdTech based or otherwise. And Teams now is that virtual classroom. Instead of being in a physical classroom, it's a place where everything starts from and happens in. And it's a glue that allows the teaching and learning to take place, drawing on these the full range of EdTech tools that are out there. And ultimately, during remote working, this is a big benefit of it, is that communication and collaboration for staff and students alike. Our staff now are quite confident in using Teams on a daily basis, calling each other, meeting with their departments and things, collaborating on live documents. And I think that is where it is coming to its own, in the fact that normally within a physical school we will speak to each other. Now we're doing that within the Teams environment. I think the next big challenge for us as educators is the sort of the hybrid teaching and learning situation we're going to find ourselves in within the next few weeks and months. And it's about how do we get that consistency and that continuity of teaching and learning for not only the educators that are in school, but those, the learners that are in school, but also those that are still working remotely outside of school, because at any one time we will only have a certain percentage of the learners in front of us. And I think what Teams does is it allows you to continue in the same vein and delivering the same diet or a very similar diet to all, supplemented by face-to-face intervention and learning. And it allows that delivery of lesson to continue, whether that young person is sat, as I said, physically within school or physically outside of school working remotely. So that's Teams at Ribblesdale, and obviously beyond that hybrid teaching and learning, I think now that a lot of our staff will use Teams a lot more within their day-to-day delivery and supporting and extending their physical classroom, because as we've gone through time, they become more competent and confident in using it as an EdTech tool. So what about lesson delivery? The topic of discussion of the moment, I think, within education is to live lesson or not to live lesson. And there are lots of people for both for and against this. And I think ultimately you've just got to consider the purpose. Obviously the vehicle could be Teams, and Teams is a good vehicle to do that in, but what is the purpose of that live lesson or the lesson delivery? Is it human interaction? Is it making sure that we break down those walls that have been built up in terms of isolation of our young people? Is it pastoral support? Because ultimately, my number one priority is around that human interaction and pastoral support and the safeguarding of our young people. Unfortunately, at this stage, the learning is important, the academic learning, but that is secondary to those things. Is it around delivery of new content? And that's becoming more to the forefront now. We set off with a view that we were going to consolidate previous learning and prior learning, but actually now it's about delivering new content. And is it about providing support to young people so that they can move on in their learning journeys to access the next steps? So there isn't one size fits all is probably what I'm saying in terms of delivery of lessons and whether they should be live. But I think the format at Ribblesdale, we've got a few different ways we're doing it. 4 group meetings in a morning, 2 or 3 times a week. They're very much about the first one, and the second one, that human interaction and that pastoral support, where they do a few activities but talk and interact with each other. We're then doing the academic live lessons, where again that's providing individual teachers with the platform to support their young people, to address misconceptions, but also that brings in that human and that pastoral support element as well. And I think you could argue in terms of the academic one-to-one live lessons or one-to-small group that there's a bit of academic input there, but how much academic impact they actually have is sometimes questionable. I think the third element is that you could look at lecture style delivery for starting off with new content within the curriculum. And that's probably where we're at now, that we need that opportunity to introduce new content. Obviously, with secondary learners, it's not the most ideal format to use in our case, but actually that it serves a purpose. And that's then followed up by probably the academic live lessons, and also definitely followed up by the pre-recorded. And I think the big benefit of pre-recorded lessons is it's a lot more focused. It allows that dual coding to come in more readily. It allows students to access on demand, as it were. And it allows you to probably, after that low stakes testing and that feedback from that you can actually intervene and address any misconceptions or areas of weakness before moving on to the next section of the curriculum. And that's where I think that, as I said before, Teams is the virtual platform that is now existing. So this is probably, in terms of the questions we're most asked, is about online safety and safeguarding, and how do we do it, and what are the best ways to do it. The first thing I want to say is, and cover, is where is it covered? Where is it documented? I think it's got to be a part of the fabric of the school. It needs to be an integral part of your teaching and learning behaviour, safeguarding and acceptable use policies. And lots of people have said to us, can we have a copy of the document you have about, online working for pupils? Well, we don't have that. It's part of our acceptable use policy. And because of Ribblesdale's journey, that has been an integral part and been woven into all of those policies for the past few years. So we've looked at those, and obviously we tweaked and reviewed a little bit, but it is an integral part of the normal policies that we have in school. The next question is, what should it look like from a safeguarding perspective? I'll be open and honest. We're in a situation where our pupils have a one-to-one device, as I said, and we took the decision before we left school to use Microsoft Intune to switch all the cameras off on our devices that students were using, and we have the power to do that. The majority don't. And we're in the process now of reviewing how that looks when we get to the other side of the summer break. And I think there's a lot of benefit from being able to see a human face and reacting to that human face. So I think the questions you need to ask is, cameras on or off? Because obviously most people don't have the ability to lock them all off. You can record any live interaction, whether that's a live lesson or whether that's a counselling support session or whatever it may be. That Teams allows you to do that and record what's going on. I think you need to share the expectations before you do this with and agree with your parents and your pupils. So where do you expect your pupils to be when you are delivering a live lesson? Not in the bedroom, perhaps, is a good way forward if at all possible. And it's aspects like that that you've got to make absolutely clear, because ultimately parents have got to support this process in keeping the son or daughter safe whilst they're working at home. And it might be that you decide to do delivery in pairs, perhaps when you're doing sort of live lessons, two teachers are delivering the same lesson in a similar way that you may well do that within the school environment anyway. And in other ways that you could use something called Teams live events, which we're not going to touch today, but they give you a lot more control in terms of that delivery of the lesson and more lecture style. And I think in terms of Teams and Office, well, what part does that play? Well, everything's logged and recorded. There's a wealth of information at the back end within the admin portal in 365, and it allows you to really drill down into the analysis of who's using it, when they're using it, and all those different aspects. So that's definitely something to, if you're not aware of that, maybe to ask your technical teams about how you get to that and just see what's in there. So just to bring it all together, I'm not going to talk through this last slide, but I think Teams has got a very important part to play in during these uncertain times. And on that screen now, you can read through those, but they're all the different things that Teams has allowed our school to carry on with in a relatively normal way, ranging from things like, sharing and updating priorities, and communication, as we know, is key. We've only got to reflect on how the communication is happening centrally, but also things like governors' meetings, awarding praise, and to the extent of being able to get a barometer for teaching and learning as well, and what that may look like. That's the big benefit of using a digital platform like Teams at whole school level. But obviously there are lots of things to consider about how it may look, both now, but obviously for a lot of us from September as we move into that hybrid way of working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause at this point, and I'm just going to say, has anyone got any questions? I'm just going to ask Lee. Have any questions come up, Lee?
Currently, no questions have been posted within the chat. It must be very clear, Paul, and very concise.
Fantastic. Oh, Gary's just put his hand up. Gary, do you want to come off mute, and have you got a question to ask?
Yeah, there's no chat window. There's no bubble to click.
Okay, no problem. I apologise for that. Have you got a specific question to ask? I suppose, as Gary's just done, if you're not seeing the chat window, then you can just put the hand up at this point and we can answer the questions. I think we've got C. Holmes with a hand up at the moment.
Thanks very much. Interesting point that you made about perhaps advising parents not to allow their child to engage in meetings in their bedroom. Is that something that's a kind of Microsoft a code of conduct, as it were? Because I mean, like, your little photograph shows a girl who's clearly probably in her bedroom, she's got a desk, little teddies. I would think most kids do live and work in their bedroom. Yeah. We haven't forbidden it, and therefore I don't want to find that I'm now allowing something that other
it's sorry, it's not a Microsoft thing. I was giving that as a crude example, really, because obviously a lot of our young people do. I think it's just making clear those expectations to parents about what you expect from the young person while they're interacting with you on Teams in maybe a live lesson situation. So that was probably a bad example for me to use.
Don't worry at all. I think a better example will probably be make sure you've got clothes on.
Absolutely, but I didn't want to say that live to 150 people. Indeed, yeah. Are there any other people, any other questions? We can keep them to the end and we can move on. So thank you for asking that. And if you do ask a question, if I ask you to put your hand down as well, that'd be fantastic when you've done that. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move on and we're going to look at a teacher's view in terms of using Teams. And Louise is going to join us, and she's going to take you through a few slides and then hopefully straight into some live demos as well. And there'll be an opportunity at the end of this section to answer any questions again. So over to you, Louise. I think you're on mute, Louise.
There we go. Is that better? Okay, so just like Paul said, first of all, I'm going to talk to you about it from a teacher's perspective. So the first thing I want to mention is, what did teaching and learning look like before lockdown? So for many of us, obviously, it was face-to-face in the classroom, having that constant interaction with the pupils. At Ribblesdale, we had the blended learning approach. So we were doing a lot of online learning, as well as using the more traditional methods. I think it's important to note that this wasn't a common consensus across the whole board of school. A few teachers were doing it, more and more started to do it, but obviously now we're in this remote learning environment, a lot more people have taken it upon themselves to skill up and use more technology as they go along. It's important that with the use of technology, we've always used it to enhance the teaching and learning of our pupils. It's never been a replacement. It's never been instead of. It's always been something to enhance the learning of our pupils. So it's always been something that that's very, very important. Pupils were also trained on technological platforms. So this were done in computer science lessons, in enrichment, where pupils were trained on how to use Teams, how to use OneNote and other features. Again, these skills were also built upon in different lessons, depending on which teachers were teaching and also which platforms they felt more confident with. So like Paul said, it's important that the staff feel very confident in using the technology before it was then rolled out to the pupils. But also as well, their diet of technology was not as varied in the classroom as perhaps what it is now. Pupils are now exposed to a variety of different platforms, online, Microsoft products, a different range of things that they perhaps didn't have any exposure to in the classroom. So I think it's been a real positive for people to embrace different technologies, and hopefully this will continue when we do eventually, whenever that may be, go back into the classroom. Thank you. So we're now looking at the new normal, which tends to be a phrase that everybody's referring to. So the new normal, we will continue to have that blended learning approach. We do live lessons, we do communicate with the pupils, we still have that face-to-face interaction, we do a lot of question and answering. So we still have that blended learning approach, and we do still use technology to enhance the learning of our pupils. Obviously, there's a lot more online learning given the current environment, and the pupils are becoming much more self-managed and self-regulated in terms of what learning they're doing, how they're progressing. They're becoming a lot more responsible in terms of doing that as well, which is fantastic. In terms of new routines, this has not just been for pupils, it's also been for many, many staff in terms of other commitments that they might have outside of school, whether they have children or people they're looking after or whatever it may be. The pupils might have different responsibilities within the home. So it's really important that we've adapted and we've been quite flexible in terms of new routines, and it's about allowing the pupils to become responsible with that. And we've also faced new challenges, the pupils themselves, in terms of getting used to technology in a much more prominent way, and also for staff in terms of monitoring engagement and also behaviour of pupils. So we have faced new challenges. We've put methods in place and plans in place to be able to support each other and overcome those challenges as well. Okay, so these are the procedures and day-to-day structures. With this, it's almost like a tick list, if you will, in terms of what types of things I would do on a daily basis. So the first thing that I would do is upload the work to the class materials. I would upload it to the class materials on a daily basis. We don't overload the pupils by sending everything on a Monday. We do it day by day, so it allows the pupils to be a bit more organised. They know what they're doing, which is a lot clearer. We've had some real positive feedback about that as well. I check in with my phone group, so the pupils check in with me on a daily basis. We just have a quick conversation. I might ask them a question. I might ask them what they had for tea last night, or just something to engage them in that conversation and just check that they're okay. We have half an hour per timetabled lesson, so we're not setting hours worth of work that we would normally do in a classroom environment. We're just doing half an hour of per timetabled lesson, so allowing those pupils to be engaged for half an hour, then being able to move on to something else, keeping that engagement up and keeping them working throughout the morning. We check the submission of works. This is done in a variety of ways. I'll be looking at Microsoft Forms, and Leah will also be looking at a couple of other examples in terms of how work can be submitted and monitored. And again, that allows us to monitor that engagement and check the well-being of our pupils. If pupils aren't doing any work, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're just sat there not doing anything or watching the TV all day. It is important to check that there's no other issues that are going on, obviously, if they're consistently not engaging with the work. So well-being is a real important factor that we've definitely worked on. Okay, so in terms of the academic work, how have we set that? What does it look like for us at Ribblesdale? So it's really important that we've done short bursts. So like I said, they're just half an hour. With those short bursts, we tend to make it as engaging as possible. So that's been done through different platforms, through forms, through Stream, and other interactive platforms that have allowed the pupils to really engage with what we're setting them. We've opened up opportunities for discussion. I think this definitely still a place for that. Even within the live lessons, you can put the hands up feature, the pupils can communicate with each other, they can communicate with myself, but also in conversations or in emails, just allowing opportunities for that discussion, asking those open-ended questions and encouraging them to communicate with is really, really important. In terms of creating academic work from existing, that's fantastic in the sense that it's really reducing teacher workload. You can share the same sort of work with different classes, so that's been really beneficial. Like Paul mentioned, we did start with building on prior knowledge. It was a real opportunity for us to kind of consolidate the learning that had happened in school, and allowed the pupils to become really confident with that learning and that knowledge that they had picked up on. But like you said, we are now introducing new topics. I think that's really important to kind of close that learning gap as much as we possibly can. And for also to keep the pupils engaged, to avoid them becoming complacent. So the new topics for them do just keep them engaged. And there's a lot of low stakes, high frequency testing. Again, I will showcase this when I do Microsoft Forms, but a real quick wins for teachers and some real good feedback from the pupils. So in terms of tracking engagement then, this can be done in a variety of different ways, and I've just outlined a couple for you on here. We've got the Insights tab, which is in Microsoft Teams, and this allows you to track engagement through the pupils and also for the whole class. It shows the digital activity, so as a percentage, again, pupils or class, in terms of how much they've interacted or how much interactivity they've had within that team. The communication activity links in with how many likes they've done, how many comments they've made. One quick easy feature is at the end of a message, just ask them to like it if they've read all the message, but make sure you put it at the bottom, otherwise they'll just like it straight away and not read the rest of it. So it's just really quick, simple, easy ways of monitoring that engagement. Through the use of OneNote, we've got the review student work feature, which is on the class ribbon at the top. And again, you can see that anything in bold has been worked on, so that's really clear indication, a real visual aid to be able to just click on and see those pupils. And also for pupils that aren't bold, again, you know that they haven't made any amendments to that sheet. Assignments, so as you can see, you can have it turned in, viewed, or not turned in. If it's not turned in, it means that the pupil hasn't even viewed it. Again, that could mean that they haven't done the work, but it could also mean that they haven't been online, which obviously is a pastoral issue and something that needs passing on from a safeguarding perspective and making sure that our pupils and their well-being is paramount, really. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Well, obviously it seems the chat pane isn't quite working, so I think it's probably better that if we do questions at the end where our participants can raise their hand. So I would suggest probably best moving on to your live demonstration, Louise. And yep. Right at the very end, we will then offer some more time for questions.
Fantastic, not a problem, thank you. Okay, so like Lee said, I'm just going to move on now to demonstrate how we can use Microsoft Forms. If you can access Microsoft Forms through the Microsoft homepage through Office 365, and I'm just going to show you quickly how to set up a new quiz. So in here, you would select new quiz, and this is just an example one that I'm going to put together with you this afternoon. So you can add your title in here. However, you can add some images in there if you want to, and you can give a brief description. What we are doing is looking at ways that we can enhance pupil oracy, their literacy skills, and also their communication skills as well. So for me, within this one, I'm going to look at adding a section. And in here, I'm going to look at adding a video of something that I've already pre-recorded in Stream. Now, this video is myself just reading an extract, so the pupils are going to answer questions based on this extract. So the reason why I've pre-recorded me reading it is, one, to model to the pupils how it should be read, and also just to encourage, there's a few difficult words in there, so I think it's important to model that to the pupils. So to be able to add this, you click Insert Media, Video, and I'm just going to paste my URL for Stream in there. You can upload any video, so whether it's from YouTube or anywhere else, you can upload that into there as well. So as you can see, the video just pops in there. So I'm just going to add questions. You've got a different selection of questions, so you can add text, ratings, Ones with data like it, where they can rank them. You can upload files to this area or ranking, but I'm just going to add a multiple choice question in here. So what is the writer's intention in the text? So as you can see, this is going to be a multiple choice question, so it's important I tick the bottom that multiple answers will be needed, and also it is a required question, it's not optional for the pupils. So option 1, we could have to promote the benefits of cycling. We could have to share his own experiences of cycling. We could add another one, to persuade readers to not take up cycling. Okay, so there's just a couple of options. So as you can see here on the right hand side, you can delete a response, you can display a message to respondents who select this answer, and you can mark which ones are correct. So this one is correct and that one is correct. And again, if pupils were to choose this one as the answer, there is a section within this response that talks about the Lycra brotherhood and the fact he looks like he's a luminous. So pupils might look at that and think, yeah, he's definitely persuading me not to take up cycling. I do feel a bit silly. So you can just pop a message in there. I can see why you would, and then you can complete the feedback, and that'll allow you to give that immediate feedback to those pupils. You can award points, which will obviously tally up as the pupils go through. So once you have your form completed, so I'll show you a completed version here. So once you've got your form completed, you've put all your questions in. Some of those questions have then got feedback. You can then share at the top. Now this bit is important in terms of if you're just sharing it with pupils within your organisation, you obviously only people within the organisation can respond. If you're wanting to share a Microsoft form with anybody else, sometimes we share them out for pupils to gather parents, to gather feedback. So you'd want anyone with this link can respond. You can send it as a link, a QR code. You can send it via email. You can also share as a template. So if you're wanting to work with somebody else within a different department or within the same department or within school, you can get a link to collaborate so other people can edit it as they're going along. Or if you want to share it and somebody else wants to amend it for their classes, for example, you can get a link to duplicate. So I'm just going to get a link here to paste, and I'm just going to pop it into the chat panel, and I'm hoping that if you can access the chat panel, because I can see that a couple of people can, please feel free just to click on that and just to select a couple of answers, just so you can see it from a pupil's perspective. And then I'm going to show what it looks like from a teacher's perspective by looking at the responses as they come in. So just give you a couple of minutes to pop that on. Whilst you are doing that, it is important that pupils are getting that variety of different ways. So you don't have to put videos on here, you don't have to upload any sort of media, but it does make a nice change for the pupils to be able to hear the teacher's voice, and it gives them that reassurance that that you're still there. So I think sometimes they do kind of forget. So as you can see here, a couple of responses has come in. So this is really quick and easy. Tells you how many people have responded, what the average score was. You can see a visual of pie charts in terms of where your strengths and weaknesses within that class perhaps lie. You can also go on to review answers. Once you're reviewing the answers, you can either do it by people, like that, or you can do it by question, and you can give feedback here, personal feedback in there, or again within people, you can also give those people their own personal feedback within there as well. There are different ways to share a form. You can just send out the link, and Lee's also going to show you a different way of setting work for pupils as well. So like Lee said, any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. There's just one or two questions come in, and I'll just answer those that are in the chat, and we'll do the rest at the end. The first one is about importing established classroom OneNotes into Teams. The best way to do that is to add it as a tab at the top via a web link is probably the easiest way. Apart from that, it would be a copy and paste job in terms of section by section or page by page in the OneNote. We've had to do that in a couple of cases at Ribblesdale. And there's another question about the video, says video cannot be found. That's because I think Louise is sharing it out of our stream, and therefore our stream is only available to those on the Ribblesdale tenancy. So apologies for that. When we do this again, we'll make sure that's shared out of somewhere you can all access. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to hand you over to Lee, and Lee's going to take you through a couple of aspects to do with assignments in teams. And then, as I said, we'll do questions at the end. So over to you, Lee.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so basically, as Louise has just shown there, what we like to do within Ribblesdale is we like to ensure that teachers' welfare is also looked after in their own well-being. So sometimes we've got to find ways that we can provide support for our pupils in a quick, nice, easy fashion as well, but also ensure that that support and feedback is meaningful. Now, as Paul alluded to right at the very start, Teams is really the vehicle that we use to be able to deliver strong pedagogy and strong teaching resources. And that's an extremely important thing that we need to consider. So what we're using Teams for is we are using it as basically the vehicle to be able to give pupils a platform to continue their learning with. And one of the best ways to be able to do that is by using the assignments function within Teams, because this allows us to use any resources that we currently have and allow our pupils to be able to get access to them. Okay, so what I'm going to currently do is just share my screen with you. Okay, bear with me, and I'm just going to show you how this looks. Okay, so at this moment in time, I have the Ribblesdale webinar team, which you can currently see. And up here at the top, we have an assignment. Now, this will always appear whenever we create a new class. So when you have a class, you will have your assignments tab. This does not appear for staff teams. So that's quite important to know the difference. If you're looking at a staff team, there will not be that assignments tab. And what this does is this allows us to distribute resources to pupils in quite an easy fashion. And I'm going to demonstrate that now. So at the moment, we can simply press the assignments and we get a couple of different options here. Okay, so at the moment, I'm going to create a brand new assignment. So it's simply create, and I'm just going to say an assignment. Now, if you've already developed a quiz like Louise has done, if you press this quiz button here, okay, and that is done on the forms, you will be able to locate that quiz. Okay, so if you press that quiz, the one that Louise has sent out, you'd be able to find that and distribute that as an assignment to your class. So what we do is we'd click assignments, and this should be a very familiar sort of platform for the majority of our attendees at the moment. It's nothing that's different. It looks like a variety of different distribution tools and platforms that we use. But the most important thing is obviously, and I think this is very important, is that those skills that you've learned on other platforms are transferable to this platform too. So what we would do is give a simple title. So this is, so I will use, for example, Lightbot. This is an activity that we use within Ribblesdale. Okay, so I could say, okay, Lightbot, and then I would simply give some instructions. Okay, so I might say, for example, please access the work. Or I could just give it any instructions that the pupils will need to be able to create or to access the work or those learning resources that we're looking for. And then I can actually add any resources that I want here. So I can press add resource, and you will notice that there are a couple of different options. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice is a class notebook. Okay, so within Class Notebook, if you have a OneNote page set up, you can actually locate the students to the page that you want to be for them to be working within OneNote. Okay, and that's a really nice way to direct students to the correct page within OneNote where that piece of work is that you want them to complete. Okay, we have different links. So if, for example, if it's a website, we can paste these links here and we can give it a description. And I could just bbc.co.uk and I can simply attach. And then we use something within computer science to aid in computer programming, which is MakeCode, and there are loads of different tutorials here that we could be able to use. So for example, we would do microbit programming and I can give them the different projects that I want them to do. So these are really kind of little plugins that we can use. And then also very, very important, we have an upload from device. So if you've got worksheets or any resources that you want to be able to distribute to the students, you can simply press upload from device, and then you will be able to have different information and stuff here that you'll be able to pass on. Okay, now the important thing when you upload from your device, that is actually a unique worksheet for every single pupil within that class. So you're not sending a shared document. So that means that a pupil who's working on their own worksheet is only working on their sheet. And then once you're happy with that, you can simply attach. Okay, and then if you want, you can add certain points. Now, once again, this is something that I tend to not do. Okay, but if anything we do, I use a rubric. Now, a rubric is super important and really helps teachers alleviate that workload and that marking. So, for example, up here, I could add a rubric, and what you can do is you can currently set up different rubrics, and I'll show you what this looks like now. So I've got a GCSE coursework example here, and I've taken this actually from our technology department. And what we can do is we can give it an example, we can give it a description, and then we can give this rubric our different grading criteria. So I know within computer science, we have a GCSE course, and there are different sections of that course that are graded in their own unique way. So for example, development of design proposal, and then we can mark, put in the criteria here. Okay, and then if I wanted to add more sections, I can add a new row, and this might be, for example, development of or implementation of product, or of product. And we can just simply add test 1. We can just add the different criteria here. So these might be, for example, excellent, well-made product, poorly glued together. I'm sure it's unique to every single person and every single department. So that's a way that you could consider that. And then once you're happy with it, you simply press attach. Now, the great thing with the rubric is once you've created it once, it's there. It's within your library. It's within your portfolio. So you can reuse it time and time again. And you can simply press attach, and that will attach it, as you can see, to this assignment, and also gives it the points that you have done within that rubric as well. And you can see that as there are these points which are just here. So if I just edit, I can add different points. Okay, that was something I forgot to show, so I do apologize. Okay, and I can weight those differently, because I know certain sections within different courses the weights are distributed slightly different. So it might be, for example, 40% for their actual design, but 60% for the development. Okay, and once that's happy, you can press update. Then we have these separate sections down here, so we can decide on where to assign this to. So for example, we can assign it to the current webinar that I'm currently in, or every single other team that I'm a part of. So if you're doing a year 7 scheme of work and you want to send it to all your classes, you can do that quite easily by sending it to those classes. The one thing I would say is at Ribblesdale, we're quite wary of overloading students with work. We will only set them the work that they are required to complete on the day that we teach them. Otherwise, then once again, it's that student well-being. If they're receiving 30 pieces of work on a Monday morning, it's quite an overwhelming experience. I'm assuming even for teachers as well, when we realise we've got to send that amount of work, and it's just making sure that we basically drip feed the work to the class at the right time. And then you can decide on the students. So I can, for example, click all students, or I can send different pieces of work to different students. Okay, and we apply a approach. Basically, we do teach the top at Ribblesdale. So every single student's given that work. We just scaffold it in different ways to ensure that students can achieve the outcome that they best possibly can do. And there are a couple of other new little bits and pieces now, which have only recently been added since last Thursday, when I've done something similar actually. So what we have here is we have a new option, okay? And what this option allows us to do is, if any pupils come into that class after the date that you've set that assignment, you can decide whether or not they see it. Okay, so if you get a new pupil within your class and you assign to all students who added it to the class in the future, they will be able to see all of that work, or you can choose not to do that. So that's obviously dependent on your philosophy as a practitioner, and whether or not it gives students opportunities to be able to basically challenge themselves if they complete work within future by looking back at work that they've currently not yet done. Okay, and then we've also got this new one over here, which is post assignment and notifications. Now this is a new one, but is absolutely essential, because what we can now do is, when we used to post things into Teams, it always used to go into the general tab. And that basically meant that the organization wasn't great, okay? But what we can do now is we can edit it, and we can decide on the correct channel that we want to send it to. Okay, now these channels are obviously set up by yourselves, so you could set them up as different units of work, or different topics, or anything there that you might want to do. And then you can, for example, decide which unit of work that you would like to set it up on, and then you can press done. And when you're happy with everything, we simply press assign. And what that does is, it will take a little moment, okay, but there will be a notification that pops up in the correct channel. As you can see, careers, automatically we've got a 1. This 1 notifies every single student that's in there. They can click on the career, the correct channel, and they can view that assignment. And just to show you how they would see it, they would see it like this, okay? So they'd see the title, the instructions, they can even see the success criteria that you've set, okay, which once again is extremely important. As long as you've used that rubric, they can see that success criteria, and they can click it, and they can see how they will be marked, or how they will be assessed. Okay, so that's an extremely important aspect. Now, just to show you kind of how that looks, okay, in terms of when you've actually set an assignment. So if pupils have been working on these assignments, okay, and if I just click on, let me see if there's more past assignments here. If I just click on this Lightbot one here, you'll see that we have several students that we've got here. And if I just click on it, okay, what you will notice is that this is a worksheet that I've sent out to students, which is called Lightbot. And what I can do is, it takes a little moment, okay, because this is connecting to their OneDrive. And what I can actually do is, I can physically see the students' work. Okay, so as at the moment, Showcase 2 has not done anything. I can go to Showcase 1, which is the next one along, and I can see that this student here has started to complete their work. Now, a question we got asked last time is can we edit this document? Of course we can. Okay, so if I want, as a teacher, we can edit the document in either the desktop app or the browser, and anything that I edit on there, the pupil will see, and will actually be there as well. So, once again, this is, you would need to think of how this is done within your own establishment. So what we do is we use a colour system. So if a colour system isn't, let's say, for example, if this isn't correct, I would highlight it, and I might say, okay, this is blue, and then I would come out of it, and I would simply just close it, because we don't need to save it. And when the student goes back in, they will be able to see that you've been able to, or you've been onto that document and highlighted it, and then you can provide them some feedback, and then just press return, and that returns it to the student. Okay, so that's an important thing. Now, the one thing that you need to remember is this is their own unique document. So it's a live document. In all fairness, I've come in just before homework is due, and when I go through the Lightbot section, I can see probably half of my class quickly going through, adding on that document, and I can see that as a live document working as the students are working on it, and you can actually see their names as they're typing on it to see currently what they're doing. So it's a really nice function there. And just to show you, because that assignment doesn't have the rubric on, just to show you how it looks if you are marking some work with a rubric. Okay, so for example, if I was marking on this student's work, okay, the rubric appears here, and I can click that, and there is the rubric. So I might say, for example, design was good, and then I can go to the next section, okay, or I can view the section here, and I can say whatever I would like here, and I can give some feedback if I choose to, or you can just send that rubric over and I can press done, and that student will be informed that you've marked and assessed their work, and they will be able to see that as well. Okay, and that is basically the little sort of one-stop store for these assignments. Now, I think the important thing to remember is these assignments can be used to distribute any content whatsoever that you want, and a couple of the times what we can do as well is it's quite difficult to see with on this view, but when you view as a student view, okay, there is an option that the students get, which is here right by the work, student work, which is none, and that here allows you or the student to attach their own work. So for example, you could say, I would like you to create a PowerPoint presentation on remote learning for me, or your 5 top tips, and could you please upload your work? And when they do that, you can then access their work as you've seen before on those Lightbot ones, and it's really saves teachers a lot of time, and once again you can use those different rubrics across your whole department. And then the last one to show you is really to ensure that once you've actually created your activity, okay, you can reuse it. So I can simply go from existing, and you will probably see all of my so these are all my classes. Okay, so if I go to 7U and I press next, these are all of my assignments that I've been setting, so you can see the way that I've labeled them. Okay, week 1 Lightbot, week 2, and these are the works that I've currently set during these remote learning. And I might say, for example, okay, I want to reuse this one that I've set here. So I would click on it and I press next. Okay, there's the assignment. Okay, week 5, year 7, frozen hour of code. There's my instructions. Okay, this one doesn't have a rubric because I use a website that also self-marks the students' work. Once again, it's about being clever how you use the assignment tool. I don't want to be able to, you know, during this time, I want the sort of the quick assessment approaches, and having websites that can self-mark really do help myself and my team to be able to ensure that we're delivering the best possible resources. And then all we can do is, once we're happy with everything, once again, I can simply press assign, and that will just reuse that assignment, and it will post it within my team and notify every single student, so they can just click on there and they can once again see their student view. Okay, now just one more thing from when it comes to Teams, which I think is a very powerful tool, especially with engagement. Because what we do have is there is an option, and you can probably see this at the very top here. We have an awful lot of different bits and pieces. So I'm sure Kahoot is one that I do know a lot of staff know and understand. So you can click on Kahoot, but I'll just show you how this works. Is up here at the top we have add a tab. Okay, and if you press that add a tab, remember the important thing is that Teams is a hub. It's that vehicle for you to distribute the different resources and tools that you want. And what you will notice is if you look here, there are absolutely loads of educational and other apps that you might use within your education establishment already. And there is a simple way that you can share that because they work well and they work together. So if you wanted to add one, so for example, there's currently one that we're using called Wakelet. If I add Wakelet, I can simply add it and it just puts it on the top, and it's easy for the students to access, and it just means that I won't sign in, but it just means that that's there for the students to access in a quick way. And a really important one about that is, as well as those apps, there are also different functions. So this is a nice one, which is called Insights. Okay, so all you need to do is to go to the plus and search for Insights. And what Insights does, okay, it gives you a way to track the activity that happens within Teams. Okay, so as you can see at this moment in time, I've got 5 users. 4 out of the 5 are not active. The only person who was active is Showcase 1. And as you can see, they have been on to, at this current time, and they've currently been working on these assignments. And that was today, and I can actually go 30 days in the past. I can go all time. And if you really want to, you can drill down to one student as well. So if I wanted to, I could click onto this student and I can find that information about that student specifically. And then I can say, okay, well, they've not accessed this work. I know that I teach them then, so I can click on and I can see what they did on that time, and I can hover over it. So that one reacted to 2 different messages. So it actually gives you a way to be able to track your class. And if you're knowing that this student, so let's say, for example, your whole class, okay, has only got 20% digital activity, it gives you as a teacher, it's informing you, and then it allows you to make the decisions on what you would do next. So I would certainly say that Insights is a valuable tool to be able to use. And I think that is really come to the end of my demonstration. So I would just like to present back to Paul to say, is there anything else or any questions that anybody would like to ask?
Hi Lee, there's just one come up in the chat, and obviously we'll do some more at the end. The question that's come up is, am I able to annotate using my stylus over the documents and send that back to the students?
Yes, that is an extremely important function. It works exactly the same way as you would edit that document, and the stylus, what that does is that allows the teacher to highlight or to edit the pupil's document in the same way that they would normally do with their stylus, and that goes back to the students as well. So it's a really nice function.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for answering that one, Lee. What I'd like to do just before we get to questions, because I'm sure there will be a few, I just want to sort of draw your attention to what I will be probably doing if you've not already done so in terms of your journeys with EdTech. Obviously, this webinar is part of the EdTech Demonstrator program in terms of the DFE providing support to schools in the use of EdTech. So if you've not already done so, please register your interest with them, and we can give you some more one-to-one support in terms of how you use EdTech and supporting you with the implementation as well. And there's not many things that we tend to get for free now in education, but this absolutely is. So if you want to go further and looking at things like CPD and implementation, perhaps from September, then please let us know. But as I said, it's as much about developing the plan as well. So if you've not already got an EdTech plan in place, please think about that now. Obviously, a lot of us are addressing the here and now at the moment, but I do think you need to start and think, well, what's this going to look like in 18 months, 2 years time at our school? And then work back from there and look at how what you're doing now can be maintained. And it's about that stickability beyond the end of the period we're in at the moment. How are you going to make the use of EdTech stick to add value to your young people when you return back to a normal way of working within school? We went through this in the presentation, but please go away and review the procedures and policies you have in place. As I said, I do think this should be an integral part of the policies like behaviour policy, safeguarding, and your acceptable use policies, rather than standalone documents. At least add them in there as an appendix if you feel that's the way forward. And again, if you want more support, particularly around acceptable use, we could do that if you come by the demonstrator project. And I think the other thing is direct your staff towards the Microsoft Educator Centre, which allows you to get more support in terms of using Office 365, Teams, and around the pedagogy of using the technology. The slide that's on your screens now is giving the Twitter handles for the three of us who presented today. The link at the top is to our website that we've got for Demonstrator School. On that website, you'll see all the webinars that we're holding over the coming weeks and months. You will see all the recordings of the webinars that we're doing. We post those up there as well. And there's also then the links to go and register your interest, again, support from a demonstrator school like ourselves. So if you do want that support from the demonstrator project, then you need to go to that link, and then that will take you out to their website where you can register your interest. Tends to take a few days for them to get back to us. It's actually London Grid for Learning who are doing the project administration, and then they'll link you up with us. So if you do go down that route, please mention our name and say that you've already sort of made a contact with us by attending one of our webinars. And the Microsoft Educator Centre, there's the web address there. Lee will share this deck with you and this live webinar presentation once it's all loaded to stream, and that code there will get you on your journey in terms of how to use the Educator Centre, and on there are literally hundreds if not thousands of different little snippets about how to use not just the products but also the pedagogy about using EdTech in terms of supporting teaching and learning. So on that note, we're going to go to questions, and I think the three of us are going to share our screen so you can physically see us. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Lee and Louise at this point, who are going to answer those questions. And if there's nothing that they can answer now, or if you feel you want to ask it later, Lee's going to share an email with you over the next day or so. So please feel free to come back to us. And as I say, I look forward to supporting more of you as part of the EdTech Demonstrator project. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand you over now to Lee and Louise, who'll go through any questions that have come up.
Hello. Okay, so I believe there was a Jason has raised their hand. If you'd like to come off mute, Jason.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that presentation. We've just moved by need really to Teams, and it's worked really well for us, but we had quite a number of staff that had been on Google Classroom and didn't really want to transfer over, and we're quite fearful of that, but everything I've seen so far today makes it look really quite straightforward to use. One of the questions I was just going to ask really is about setting up classes, and a simple way of doing that is something you have to get your IT department to do, because it looks like groups of emails.
Yes. Okay. So the way that our classes are set up, we use a company, an external company, and the company that we use is called Salamander. But basically, what they do is they provide the sync between our data management system and basically all of our groups. Okay. And the way that they do is they manage that for us. Yeah. So if a pupil moves class, the next day when the teacher comes in, that pupil is now in the correct teacher's class, and it happens and it data syncs every evening around about, I think it's 2 o'clock in the morning, to be fair. And what that does is that creates all email groups for teachers. So for example, we have teachers of, and then the pupil's name, and it also creates those groups for all of our classes, and it just means that it's an awful lot easier for us to manage it. And it's not obviously just within Teams, but all the other bits and pieces that we use across school, on all the other different platforms that we do have access to, can also use those groups as well, no matter what platform we are using.
Right, will that just do that from a Sims extraction? Is that your?
It is, yes. It's I'm not the technical tech guys, okay, so yeah. I'm used to it basically working for me, but I've got to be completely honest with you. Yeah. If that works and I don't complain about it, then you generally know that the company and the tech, our technicians are doing a superb job, and it just works, and that's the real you know, the real thing to show how well it does work, because we don't notice anything. We log in and the pupils are in our classes. As a teacher, the classes are there. We don't have to actually set anything up, and it's that company that we use that provide all of those groups, and it's not a very expensive cost either in terms of a relation of things, and I would say it's probably the best couple of £100 that we spend.
Yeah, because with Google Classroom, obviously you give them a class code and they buy in, but there's a little bit of chasing involved in that one. And setting of assignments, is that just done through the assignment button under Teams?
Yes. So within Teams, you can set the assignments in that. Is there any other ways that you were considering or maybe thinking of?
No, I just know because when we're in our normal Teams, which is again for meetings, that kind of stuff, sharing information in that way for faculties, obviously the facilities are there for doing your classes, but if we go to the little rucksack and the assignments one, that I can see that, and I've linked on that previously, and I've seen how you can set up your classes, and at that point I just thought, whoa, this is where we've got to start moving chunks of data about to get the students in there from a list.
Yes, that's correct. Once your students are in the correct classes, to be able to then distribute the work by assignments is simply the easiest way. One of the things that a lot of people get confused about is within Teams, if you distribute it within a conversation, so you know, at the conversation pane, that then becomes a shareable document, which means you could technically have every member of class on that document at the same time, trying to edit, trying to alter that work. The way that we would suggest it is, if you want to share a document on there, make sure it's a PDF so it can't be altered. Otherwise, use the assignment, because that sends the pupil a unique file that they can then edit and create. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Lee, there's just a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is, how do you change your background?
Okay.
So it's with the 3 dots on the
Yes. Okay. So the first thing is what I've noticed is there seems to be sometimes some errors with people not being able to access the chat pane, and the only reason why I can think of this is maybe the browser that's being used. So the first thing is, I'm not 100% sure that all of you will see this within your browser. Okay, but on the more actions, you will see like a 3 little dots. Okay, and if you press those 3 little dots, okay, you will see an option then that says show background effects, and then you will see a vast amount of background effects. However, you can decide to choose whichever suits you. So I think most of us at this moment in time might prefer something a little bit more like this, and rather be sitting on the beach, you know. So there are a lot of backgrounds, and if you choose to as well, you can also have personalized backgrounds that you might decide to have. So for example, we've put our own Ribblesdale School within a background that we can use as well.
And the next one, so myself talked about class materials. Could I explain? Yeah, so the class materials is when you're in your class teams, at the top in the files tab, there will be a folder called class materials, and anything that is uploaded into that class materials folder is not editable by the pupils. So it's like a master copy. If the pupils want to do anything with it, then they have to download it, save it into their own area, and then they can edit it. So it just takes away that confusion of, like Lee just said then, several pupils editing the same document. So if it's in the class materials folder, then they can't do that. Another question. So when you set up a team, is it essential to use school, initial and hyphen first, for example, rigs, hyphen, training?
No, it's not. The reason why we've done that is so we can see which teams are part of which year groups at the back end, because any team that you create basically creates a SharePoint site, and it helps out us as an admin to be able to keep control of what's, you know, what teams are being used, and it's a very quick way to be able to see which teams shouldn't be there or which teams are inactive, and that's the way that we hyphen them. So we give each year group so for example, if our new year 7s will start with the year that they come within to Ribblesdale, so it would start with 2020, and then it would have the class code, and then the next year 7s that come will be 2021, and that's the way that we decide to name our naming convention, so we can track it with a little bit more consistency.
Okay, another question. If you load a video clip into class materials for one class, do you need to load it up again into a different class, or can it be shared somehow?
Do you want to answer that one, Louise? Or
yeah, I was just going to mention that if you're wanting to share something for pupils, you can share it through an assignment feature, so then you can create from existing and just distribute it to the different pupils. If you upload it into Stream and allow other people in the organisation to see it, so it's not just assigned to a class, you can then just post the URL in the channel. And if you just post in the URL in there, you can, in the conversations tab, you can post to multiple channels. So you've got the feature to be able to share it to different places. So you could just copy the URL in there, post to multiple channels, and it will go to different classes at the same time. There's just a couple of ways of being able to do that. And the next one, if your browser doesn't give you the option to change the background, what can be done?
Okay, the suggestion I would use is use a different browser, because obviously if that browser is not working correctly with the interface, it would probably have something to do with how the browser's reading the source code. The only other thing that I would suggest is I've had a couple of experiences when I've had conversations with people where if they are using the desktop version of the app, they have an awful lot more control. So I would certainly suggest to download the desktop version, and then there seems to be an awful lot more options there. If you're using the browser version of Teams, sometimes it can give you slight errors. For example, I've spoken to a colleague of mine where they are upside down for the whole entire session because we weren't able to get to turn their camera the right way, and a simple download of the desktop version really did help and solve that. So I would certainly suggest downloading a desktop or even the app on a mobile phone device, which I currently also have.
Okay, Robert, if you want to just pop off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. It's just by way of helping a little bit. I'm no computer whiz by any means, but I have a Mac, and it took me forever to try and get this set up. Originally, a couple of weeks ago, well, 4 weeks ago, and I realised what it was. The Mac, because of the way Safari works, only shows it as a preview, so you only get some of the functionality. So what I had to do was go into the settings and change it all to allow it, on this occasion, to allow it to use everything. So I've sort of downloaded it yet again, and it works perfectly now, just to help anybody who's running a Mac with Safari. All right.
Oh,
fantastic. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One tiny thing. Your background, Louise, I teach musical instruments. I'm a music teacher, and I can't use that background with playing flute because kids can't see my fingers playing flute. So I've used the beach one in the past, which I think is really quite a nice one. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. No problem.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions, either in the chat or if anyone wants to raise their hand? Nope.
Okay, so I think that's us bringing this to a close then. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening and keep safe.
Thank you.